In 1947, the Republic of China drew a map with 11 dashes to show its land claims. Later, they changed it to 9 dashes after talking with other countries, but there were still disagreements, especially with nearby countries like the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Vietnam. They all claimed parts of the same sea. Things got more intense when the US Navy started patrolling the area to keep the sea open for everyone. China didn't like this and said they had control over those waters. They even built things there to show they meant it. Then, in August 2022, something important happened. Nancy Pelosi, a big politician from the US, went to Taiwan. This made China really mad. Their planes started flying in a way that made everyone nervous, and their ships got really close to US bases. It was clear that things were getting worse between China and the US. Recently, there have been reports of Chinese surveillance balloons drifting into US airspace, adding to the tension between the two countries. Diplomatic talks are strained, and lawmakers from both sides are concerned. In a leaked memo, General Mike Minihan warns that there could be a war between the US and China as soon as 2025. So, why is this happening? It seems like both countries are heading towards a conflict without realizing it. Sometimes, countries feel the need to show their strength to keep others in line. This can involve military displays like parades or making deals for weapons. The amount of money a country spends on defense isn't just about the numbers. It shows how dedicated they are to their security. In 2023, China officially spent $230 billion on defense, much less than the $816 billion the US spent. But that's not the whole story. China's defense budget doesn't cover everything it spends on its military, like its Coast Guard or space programs. When you adjust for factors like the cost of living in each country, China's spending is nearly equivalent to 87% of what the US spends. While the US spreads its military presence worldwide, China focuses mainly on its own region. This strategy allows China to get more bang for its buck from its defense budget. These less obvious details have left many US military leaders feeling uneasy, as China's military capability appears stronger than previously thought. China's growing military power is no secret, and its primary objective is to assert control over the region known as the First Island Chain by 2030. This chain includes countries such as Japan, the Philippines, and Indonesia, with Taiwan situated in the middle. China's ultimate goal is to bring Taiwan under its authority, even if it requires using force. To achieve this, China has been rapidly acquiring advanced submarines, aircraft carriers, cutting-edge jets, and other military assets. This military buildup has sparked concerns among US officials, who worry that a conflict could arise sooner than anticipated. Beijing has set specific deadlines, with 2024 being particularly significant as it coincides with elections in both the United States and Taiwan. There's a belief that the US election could be tumultuous, while Taiwanese officials fear that by the end of 2024, China will have amassed enough military might to consider an invasion of Taiwan in 2025. If a conflict were to occur between the US and China in the next decade, it's unlikely that they would directly target each other's mainland. Instead, the focus would probably be on Taiwan, the South China Sea, and the East China Sea. These regions are critical for China because they surround its mainland and control its access to the world's oceans. The South China Sea, in particular, holds strategic passages into the Indian and Pacific Oceans with various islands and archipelagos that could house air and missile forces. Similarly, the East China Sea, with its chain of islands from Japan to Taiwan, serves as a strategic barrier for China. For China, which heavily relies on trade, having control over these regions is essential. While it's a major trading power, China lacks guaranteed access to the world's oceans without control over the First Island Chain. This puts its vast economic interests at the mercy of other naval powers, especially the United States. So, for Beijing, maintaining the status quo is not a viable long-term strategy. The narrow passages between the islands and archipelagos pose critical points of control, easily accessible to US carrier battle groups. Points like Malacca, Sunda, Lombok, Karimata, Masar, Mindoro, and Luzon could all be vulnerable to naval blockades if such actions were taken. In particular, the Malacca Strait holds significant importance, as it could severely disrupt China's economy, potentially challenging the Communist Party's hold on power. In the event of a conflict between Washington and Beijing within the next decade, both would vie for dominance over the islands and archipelagos, forming the first island chain in the South China Sea. The US Navy's primary objective would be to close and maintain control over these strategic choke points. Given the current capabilities, the People's Liberation Army Navy plan stands little chance against the US Navy in the near future. Recognizing this, the PLA Navy would likely opt for a different strategy, focusing on occupying some of the islands within the vicinity. By establishing a presence and deploying air, land, and anti-ship missile systems, they aim to deter or push back American fleets from these choke points. This tactic would allow China to secure guaranteed passages to the world's oceans, a key strategic goal. This explains China's significant investments in the artificial islands in the South China Sea. Currently, Beijing has militarized 3 of its 7 artificial islands, Mischief Reef, Subi Reef, and Fiery Cross, transforming them into unsinkable aircraft carriers equipped with anti-ship and anti-aircraft missile systems, as well as fighter jets, laser technology, and jamming equipment. Since the PLA Navy lacks the capability to directly open the choke points in the South China Sea, it can instead leverage air and missile systems stationed on the artificial islands to enhance its firepower. Meanwhile, in the East China Sea, the tactical situation presents a slightly different but equally pressing challenge. However, it's crucial to understand that this conflict isn't just about battleships and negotiations. It's also heavily influenced by media narratives and government propaganda. There's a constant back and forth in the media, with both China and countries around the South China Sea using state-run channels to reinforce historical claims and nationalistic sentiments. These stories, tied to notions of history and pride, can inflame tensions and escalate conflicts. The Ryukyu Islands and Taiwan further complicate matters for China's Navy, dividing it into 2 groups, one in the north and east and the other in the south. In the event of a conflict, China's primary objective would be to secure the Taiwan Strait, allowing these naval groups to coordinate effectively. Seizing control of Taiwan or weakening its defences would address this challenge, providing China with a strategic passage through the first island chain and granting access to the open oceans beyond. Taiwan holds significant strategic importance for China, serving as more than just a chess piece for its navy. It acts as a key to unlocking various doors for China's strategic objectives. By gaining control over or weakening Taiwan, China stands to enhance not only the operational capabilities of its navy, but also access vital resources such as trade, technology, and diplomatic interactions with other nations. Taiwan represents a dual victory for China, supporting both its military goals and broader regional interests. In the event of a conflict between China and the US, China would rely on missiles from land, air and sea to deter the US Navy from accessing critical areas like Taiwan and other choke points within the first island chain. However, there's a significant drawback to this strategy. China's missiles can be intercepted by US defenses. This puts China at a disadvantage, at least for the next decade. Therefore, it's unlikely that China would initiate a war when it's not in a position of strength. Looking ahead to the period after 2030, the landscape could become more volatile. The introduction of 5th-generation fighter jets and superfast missiles could significantly alter the balance of power. China boasts the J-20 Mighty Dragon, while the US possesses the F-35 Lightning II, considered superior. Additionally, the US maintains strong alliances with countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, Thailand, Taiwan, and the Philippines, bolstering its regional influence. However, China is aggressively developing hypersonic weapons and rapidly expanding its military capabilities, including the acquisition of more aircraft carriers. If this trend continues, China's military could approach parity with the US by 2050. By then, both the PLA Navy and the US Navy could have similar gross tonnage of ships and nearly the same number of aircraft carriers. In summary, while the likelihood of an American-Chinese war in the next decade seems low, the long-term forecast suggests growing uncertainty. Storm clouds are gathering on the horizon, indicating potential challenges ahead. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more weekly videos. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts.